Hey everybody, welcome back to the Squares and Circles podcast where we talk about this weird in-between phase of teenagehood and adulthood. I'm your host Ellie and today we're going to be talking about healing. It's so hard to heal from my experience and it's been a journey just learning how to heal in the first place. So I'm going to be talking about how to do it, where to start, what even is it, basically everything about healing. So if you feel like you've got some healing to do, this is the episode for you. Also, sorry again for last week's episode being up late. But you do get 2 episodes this week, so can't complain too much. And I had a really nice time with my friends in Italy, so it was a really lovely week, and I'm glad to be back though. Anyway, let's get into the episode. I think we are all very well aware that life holds a lot of pain in various capacities, and none of us are immune to it. Whether it's trauma, betrayal, stress, mental health issues, financial issues, or whatever else, there's so many types of problem. We all go through something that we will need to heal from at some point or another. Healing, in my experience at least, can often feel like a lonely and difficult journey because it's so personal and unique to your life that it's kind of hard to feel like anyone else is going through what you're going through. But although there are a lot of ways that we can experience pain, there are only so many ways, if that makes sense. So somebody will be experiencing something similar to you, like somewhere in the world. And I don't know, that just helps me a lot. It makes me feel very, I don't know, it just makes me feel less lonely. It's nice to know that you're not the only one struggling with something. I mean, you can go online and try and find people that are similar to you and talk about it if that's going to help you. But for me, just knowing that there are people out there is enough to comfort me. I don't know, it just helps me feel less lonely. I've gathered some statistics to put in perspective just how many people struggle in the UK alone. So the first one is 1 in 3 adults report experiencing a traumatic event. That is a third of the population. That's pretty high, I would say. And 74% of the population have felt stressed and unable to cope in the past year. That's ridiculous. That is so high. That's 26% of people that don't feel like they can't cope. That's so low. And the final statistic, which is kind of crazy as well, is that about 1 in 4 people experience mental health issues. A quarter of the UK's population experience mental health issues. And that's just recorded. Like, there's going to be so many other people that don't even know they've got mental health issues or, like, haven't recorded them or whatever. You know, like, it's definitely higher than that. That's crazy. And whilst it's really upsetting that the numbers are pretty high for these stats, it is comforting to know that you're not the only one, and it can help you to validate your feelings, which I think is a vital first step in healing your problems. Because if you can't validate and accept your problems, then healing them is going to be pretty much impossible. I started my healing journey when I was about 18, and I struggled quite a lot with my mental health when I was a teenager. Mostly with depression and anxiety, and I also had a pretty tricky relationship with food and exercise. When I was 18, I finally decided I could take control and start healing at least my relationship with food, and I began working on self-acceptance and self-love, which began to heal my relationship with my body, and in turn my relationship with food and exercise. And this process was super long, and I experienced so many setbacks and I guess relapses, I don't know. But I'm finally now in a place where I just don't really care enough about what I look like for it to affect my mood. Like, I do still care in a way that I want to express myself in a way that I feel represents me, and I like fashion and I like dressing, you know, I like dressing fun and I like looking nice. But I don't do it because I care about how I look now. It's more about how I feel, and like, my appearance doesn't consume my mind anymore. If I feel good, it's good enough for me. But yeah, that was the first thing I started healing, and throughout that whole time I still struggled quite a bit with my depression and anxiety. But I think for a long time I didn't really feel like it was something I could control and therefore could fix. So I just kind of dealt with it in the best way that I could, which back then was with distractions, weed, and at times isolation, so not really the best coping mechanisms. And I lived like this until pretty recently, to be honest. And I realised I could control my other mental issues, and I began to take control of my life again without letting depression and anxiety ruin it anymore, because they were ruining my life. They were making me way less social. I don't know, I was just not myself, man. I was just kind of quiet, and that's not like me. I would say I began this journey when I was about 21 years old, and it's again been a super big struggle, and I've still got a little way to go with it. But I'm now so aware of the behaviours that I exhibit due to anxiety or depression that they are super easy to spot now, and so it's a lot easier to validate and then heal them because I know what they are, where they come from, how to deal with it, what's causing it, like, you know, all the juicy stuff. And looking back now, I'm realising actually how many layers there were to the healing process, because even though I've been doing it for like 3 years consistently, I'd say, I feel like I've only just started. But now that I'm thinking about it, I've actually gone through so much more than I thought I had. I guess I just kind of forgot about them because they're not problems in my life anymore, so I don't think about it. But they all were very real problems in my life at the time, and I had to heal them to get to what I'm healing today. So, wow, it's actually really easy to forget how far you come. Never forget, guys. Anyways, I started journaling, I did some inner child work, and I did some shadow work, and also some guided meditations to help me through it. And I'm not gonna lie, I had a really terrible time during most of this process. At the start, I was barely scratching the surface, so it felt really good, like I would have mini breakthroughs, and they'd be really positive in changing my life and my mindset, and or like stop me worrying about something that I didn't need to worry about. But then I peeled back more of the layers and I was digging deeper into all of my issues, and this is where it gets hard. Especially as I was growing older and I was learning more about like my family and my past and my upbringing and all of that sort of stuff, I realised more problems and more issues and complexes my upbringing had given me. And over the past couple of years, I have been uncovering these layers and getting to the root cause of my issues so that I can heal it effectively rather than ignore it and distract myself like I used to. But it's just so hard, and it's a long old process, and I don't think it's ever going to end. I'm still on this journey now, and I do continue to learn things about myself all the time, and I'm sure this journey, as I said, isn't going to end soon, if ever, because in life it's inevitable that things are going to be hard and painful sometimes. We'll probably all get traumatised in some way from time to time. I've probably got a bit more trauma on the horizon. Hopefully not, but, you know, it's likely. And we'll probably never stop healing, which kind of sucks because it's a lot of work and pain and emotional energy, but also I found that it's brought me so much growth and change, and I'm now happier and stronger, so it is kind of a good thing, I guess. And it does get easier the more you deal with it, because you learn how to deal with it and you become equipped with more tools on handling your trauma and things you need to heal. Okay, so that brings us on to part 2 of the podcast, where we talk about ways to heal. Of course, the obvious way that everyone suggests is by getting professional help through therapy or medication or something. I'm not really going to talk about that today because it's not accessible for everyone. It's expensive, and if you can get on the NHS list, then it's really long, and not everyone has the NHS in the world. So I'm going to talk more about ways to self-heal and help yourself for free. However, that being said, if you can afford therapy or medication or whatever, like professional help you think is going to help you, of course, go for it. Do that. That is a privilege that we would all love to have. Just do this work on the side as well, and it will work probably way better. I think a good way to start healing is through journaling. And this doesn't have to be written in a book like the classic journaling you think of. It can be on your notes on your phone, or in like text message form to somebody, or a video journal, or artwork, or whatever. Like, find something that works for you and use that method, as long as it helps you express your emotions and dig through some brain stuff. Then do what works for you. But anyway, however you do it, it's such a good way to start healing because it is easy, and in my experience and the experience of everyone else I know who's tried it, it's really effective as well. I think it's really good for me because it helps me to see how I feel when my head gets all loud and messy, and I can organise it all on a page to get a better grasp of how I'm actually feeling, rather than just feeling confused and overwhelmed and so many other things. And it's also helped me to get to the root of so many of my issues because, as I mentioned in one of my previous episodes, when I write, I just let the pen follow my thoughts without thinking about what I'm writing too much. And when I do that, I often discover things I haven't even subconsciously thought about. And I've had quite a few breakthroughs this way, which feels really nice, even though some of them are pretty terrible. But it feels nice to have a breakthrough all the time. One way that you can journal is by doing shadow work, and shadow work is defined as exploring and integrating the unconscious aspects of oneself, such as repressed emotions, fears, and desires, to achieve personal growth and wholeness. So basically, in doing this, you're healing the parts of you that you're either subconsciously or consciously ashamed of, and you might not even be aware of these traits until you start doing the shadow work, because I didn't know a lot of mine. For example, I always thought I was a really chilled out and very carefree person, and although I was in some ways, like, I don't know, until I started doing shadow work, I didn't realise that I was actually a bit of a control freak, and not in fact super chilled and laid back. I would act laid back and chilled out because I wanted to come across that way, because I was subconsciously afraid to be viewed as controlling, I guess, I don't know, and I'd be like dying inside wanting to say something in so many situations, because I was a massive people pleaser, but I just didn't want to come across as controlling. But once I did learn this about myself, I was able to actually control it a bit more, because I was aware of why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and because I was aware of it, and I knew that I didn't want to be like this, and I was able to talk myself out of it, kind of, I guess, because I would just think, like, I'm being controlling, I don't need to be controlling, this thing doesn't matter enough for me to care this much. And then after that little pep talk, I'd be fine. I feel like a lot of us didn't really get to learn how to manage our emotions effectively. I don't know, a lot of us in my generation at least grew up getting hit or shouted at when we did something wrong. So I don't know, I feel like that doesn't do a very good job of teaching you how to manage your emotions. I don't know. So teaching yourself that and learning how to do that is super important. And that one example that I shared is literally just an example, but it does apply to pretty much every bit of shadow work I've done so far. To do shadow work, the way that I found most effective for me is to choose an element of my life one at a time, such as trauma, relationships, body image, or whatever you're struggling with at the time, and look at prompts to do with that element of your life. For example, if I was getting triggered all the time at something and I would want to do some shadow work relating to trauma, so I would Google shadow work prompts for trauma and find a list that I think would work well for me, and then each day I would answer one or two of the prompts depending on how I felt, until either I felt like I didn't need it anymore or I wanted to focus on a different area of my life for a bit. I found this super helpful because when you write from a prompt, it gives you something to think about that isn't always what's been on your mind, and I found that more often than not these prompts will get something out of my brain that I didn't even know needed to come out. It's actually kind of magical. I really could not ever stop shouting and raving about journaling. Another big part of shadow work is inner child healing, and I think this is a huge part of healing that we all need to do, regardless of your upbringing, because I didn't have the worst childhood at all. I was in quite an emotionally repressed household, but it was loving and it was caring, and money was tight more often than not, but overall it was a pretty good childhood. However, as I started doing more and more healing, I realised that a lot of my problems now do stem from my childhood. For example, I struggle quite a bit with perfectionism, and if I can't do something perfectly, then I just won't take it seriously. It'll be a big joke to me. But through healing, I figured out that this had come from my overachieving era as a kid, because I was so highly praised for being smart. I think I've actually spoken about this before, but I was always so highly praised for being smart and talented for my age. And then when I produced something good but not above my level, I wouldn't really get so praised for it. And so I learned to always be the best or it won't be good enough. Now that I'm aware of this though, I'm aware that this is the way my brain was wired, and so through a lot of healing and journaling, I was able to change my mindset and be able to try new things and take them seriously and not worry if I'm being good at what I'm doing, because I realised that I don't need to be the best at everything to be worthy of doing it. I can just do it and have fun. And if I do want to get good and practice, then I can, but there's no pressure to do that anymore. And of course there's much deeper and more traumatising things from my childhood than that, but I won't talk about them today. I'll save them for another episode. But like this, again, the same concept applies. Also, with inner child healing, I got kind of stuck on the concept that I had to be like really little in order to heal it. So anything above the age of 10 was not classed in my head as inner child healing. But I honestly go back to like being 20 years old. I was 24 years ago. But if I've got stuff to heal from being 20, I still felt like a kid then. So, you know, don't give yourself an age limit. If there's something you need to heal from a certain age, do that. The way that I like to do my inner child work is by writing my younger self a letter and giving her advice that I needed on a certain topic, such as like body image, relationships, or whatever is causing you issues now. Because by writing a letter to my younger self rather than to myself now, I found it way easier to show myself compassion, and it's even more helpful if you look at a picture of yourself as a kid, because then you can visualize who you're talking to. And when you see yourself as a kid, it's really hard to be mean to that person, because more often than not, you're just like, oh, like, poor you. You've got, especially once you're aware you've got issues, you're like, damn, you do not deserve that, you poor little thing. And it's just way easier to show compassion and give yourself the advice that your younger self would need to hear, and that advice that you're giving your younger self will benefit you now. Plus, talking to your younger self, like talking to your kid, is so healing, and it sounds so simple and like it wouldn't really do that much, and if you are skeptical about it, try it at least once. You've got nothing to lose, but so much to gain, because it's such an amazing activity and it's so powerful. I think it's helped me out so many times. Whilst we're on the topic of journaling, I just want to talk about some journaling tips that I've learned along the way, because I found it really hard to keep it consistent, and it's only in the last 6 or 7 months that I've started to journal consistently, and I've come so far and I've learned so much in that time. And I really believe that consistency is key because of that, because I was not learning so much when I was doing it inconsistently. I have a whole Instagram post about this, so if you want to check that out and save it for later, go do that. But I also wanted to talk about them here too, because I think it's so important. The first tip we've already kind of spoken about is to use prompts. I found that when I was slacking with journaling, I had nothing to write really, which is why I was slacking. I tended to only journal on bad days, and that would pretty much just be me complaining rather than making any effort to heal whatever it was I was upset about. And then when I started to use prompts, I was writing about things that were healing me every single day, regardless of how my day went, because I had prompts to follow and I would have something to say about that prompt every single day. Obviously, if I wanted to write something else as well, I wouldn't stop myself, but I would then do the prompt before or after that, alongside whatever I wanted to complain about that day. And I wouldn't just complain, I would also try and give myself solutions to whatever I was complaining about. Although, with that being said, tip number 2 is to not feel restricted by your prompts. I spent quite a lot of time using prompts, and when I would get a bit off track with what it was asking me, I would kind of reel myself back in and talk about whatever the prompt wanted me to talk about. But you need to remember that prompts are exactly just that, they are prompts. Use them as talking points rather than questions to answer, because often if you get sidetracked, you'll discover something useful for your healing journey that you may not have otherwise. Tip number 3 is to take breaks when it gets too much. Writing about things you need to heal every single day is so hard, and it can be so emotionally draining. If you feel like it's getting too much, don't force yourself to keep going. Have a few days off to reset and look after yourself, do some self-care, go on some walks, spend some time with yourself, or spend some time with your friends or people that you love around you, and then just get back to it when you feel ready again. Don't force yourself if you're not feeling it, because it's hard bloody work. Tip number 4 is to not be disheartened if you do miss a day or a few days or however long. I used to get really discouraged when I missed a day, because in my head I felt like I kind of broke my streak or whatever. So I would just stop doing it for a few months and then get back into it, and it was just a vicious cycle continuously, like, I messed up. Anyway, whatever, back to my old habits. And then I'll be like, my life kind of sucks. I need to do something about that. Let's start journaling again. Yeah, anyway, vicious cycle. But then I started to go a bit easier on myself, and when I missed a day, I would just be like, that's okay, I'll just do 2 prompts tomorrow to catch up. And then I started to do some more healing and had a bit more respect and compassion for myself. And now I'm just at a point where I don't even feel like I need to make up for it anymore. If I miss a day, then I won't feel pressure to catch up the next day. I can if I want, but there's just no pressure for it anymore. I just kind of do what I feel like doing. Listen to my body. Be intuitive. And my 5th tip is to add it into your routine somewhere so that you can keep it as consistent as possible. I, first of all, started trying to journal every night before I went to sleep, which for a while worked for me in terms of my actual routine. I was being consistent, but I didn't really like going to sleep feeling heavy from healing and journaling and dragging up, random stuff. So I've now switched it to doing it when I wake up. And then I do yoga or meditation or some sort of mindfulness activity or exercise to raise my vibration so that I can actually live my day feeling happy and uplifted and positive, rather than ending my day on a negative note, which is what it kind of felt like I was doing. Even though healing is obviously positive, talking about dark stuff all the time before sleep does feel like a negative activity, you know what I mean? But you can obviously add it into your routine wherever works for you and do it whenever, whenever works for you, just as long as you can keep it consistent wherever you put it in your day. So that's all my journaling tips, but I do have another thing that has really helped me with healing, and that is reading self-help books. And I know reading isn't really for everyone, but this also applies to self-help podcasts and audiobooks as well. I've read quite a few now, and they always really help me. Some of them are a bit hit or miss, but they can't all help everyone. You just need to find the ones that work for you. Some of the ones that I've read and listened to and really enjoyed have been The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, which I've already spoken about. And also another book that I've already spoken about, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And also the podcast Self-Obsessed by Tam Kaur and The Psychology of Your 20s. These have been really beneficial for me because they've opened my mind to new perspectives, and they have also enlightened me to think more freely and less stressfully, and they've taught me to feel more confident, be less of a people pleaser, and to live for myself, as well as how to overcome anxiety and depression. They've just kind of helped me out in so many areas of my life. I really like the podcast because it's like chatting to a friend and getting advice from them, and I feel like the ones that I mentioned explain things so well, and it's so easy to grasp the concept of what they're talking about, which is obviously really helpful. And my final piece of advice for healing is taking care of your physical health. And that sounds really obvious, but for a long time during my healing journey, I wasn't really looking after my physical health, and I was wondering why my progression was so slow. But then when I started washing my face and having a skincare routine and brushing my teeth and showering regularly and washing my clothes and keeping my space clean and changing my bed sheets weekly and eating good food and drinking enough water and exercising for my body and not just to lose weight and so many other things, my mental health instantly changed, and I was able to remain more positively and optimistic about my internal healing because I had the energy to do it because I was eating and drinking right. I had the confidence and the strength because I was practicing mindfulness and looking after my skin and body. I was also so much more productive because I had a clean space and a clean mind, and I had organised myself a routine where I start my days in a positive and productive note with my self-care, and then at night I was sleeping better because of my nighttime self-care routine. And it seems so obvious because we all know that our physical affects our mental, and I was aware of this before I started doing it, but actually now I'm doing it and I see the benefits, and it makes me realise how silly I was being when I wasn't going on walks and brushing my teeth and doing all the things that are fairly simple but hard to do when you don't feel like it. And well, not don't feel like it, but are going through some, mental health, whatever. But I don't know, it just seems kind of silly to me now that I'm through that, because it really, really makes a difference. If I just did that, I could have felt better. But again, it's not that easy at the time, of course. And at first, I did find it really hard to implement all of these things into my routine. I actually had to buy one of those magnetic chore chart things that you put on the kids' fridge for their pocket money. But having one of those really, really helped me out actually, because I would have to do all of my things to get full ticks for the day. I had on there skincare, brushing my teeth, showering, taking my vitamins, drinking enough water, doing 10,000 steps, and seeing how far the bits that I had done and the bits that I hadn't done on one board in one place just really motivated me, because I could see how far I was slacking behind if I didn't have many ticks on the board or whatever. I don't know, it's just really motivating for me. But this might not work for everyone, and you could try anything else. There's apps like Finch to help you do all of your daily things, or you could motivate yourself with rewards each week, or whatever else might work for you. And also, if you start with a short-term target, it makes it way less overwhelming, because I think I kept tripping up because I was like, right, this is it for the rest of my life. I'm never doing this thing again, or I'm only ever going to exercise again for the rest of my life. Just as an example, it kind of overwhelmed me, which I think is a big reason why I stopped. So I started with a 30-day target to do yoga every day for 30 days. And I followed this yoga program, which was a 30-day one, obviously. And I'll link it down below because it was actually really good. And I did it every day. I succeeded. And now it's been 3-4 months. I started that in January, so it's 4 months, I think. But I still do yoga most days because I've built it as a habit. And by challenging myself to do it every day for 30 days, I then just made it a habit, and now it's just something that I want to do. I'm not forcing myself. It's just a habit, and it makes me feel good, so why wouldn't I do it? And also, you can start with smaller goals. You can start with a week, 3 days, whatever's going to work for you. Just start small and build your way up, because doing something is much better than doing nothing. Now for part 3 of the podcast, where I tell you the important things that you should take away from this episode. So all of the tools that I just mentioned, do not just consume them. When you read a book or listen to a podcast or make a realization about something in your journal, it's really important to take the things you've learned and implement them into your life. For example, if you journaled about people pleasing and you learned how to stop doing it from a podcast, you need to start doing those things in order to heal. Learning how to heal is part of the process, but not the whole journey. You need to put in an active effort to heal in your everyday life. Number 2, healing is a hard and bloody horrible thing to do. Be gentle with yourself, listen to what your brain and body need, and don't rush into anything that you aren't ready for. There is no time pressure on healing, and you need to take as much time as you need with it, and go at a pace that you're comfortable with, taking breaks whenever you need. Tip number 3 is mindfulness and gratitude will help you so much through this process. Healing can be such an emotionally draining journey, so practicing mindfulness and expressing gratitude helps you to remember exactly where you are now and how far you've come. And also it helps you to acknowledge the positive things around you. Because when you're healing, it's so easy to focus on negative things in your life because you're doing a lot of processing and healing of usually negative things. So it's really nice to remind yourself of your current, hopefully better, or at least something positive is going on situation, and be grateful for what you do have and what you have healed already. Even if it's just that you're grateful for deciding to start the healing journey, because that's a really big first step in itself. You can't do anything else without doing that. Mindfulness activities that really helped me were yoga and meditation. Starting your day with a meditation is actually such a game changer. I really recommend it. It really sets you up for like a positive day. Number 4 is that you are never alone in your problems. No matter how lonely you feel, there will always be somebody out there to understand. And if you can't find somebody who fully understands, you can always find somebody who'll listen at least. And that's literally what this podcast is for. So feel free to message the podcast Instagram if you ever need to talk about something or need advice, because I'm always down to be a listening ear. And the final point that I want you to take away from this is to celebrate your progress, even if it's just a step in the right direction. Even, as I said, if it's just the first step or a small step. Healing is such a hard journey, and you should be so proud of yourself for even thinking about starting. And if you're listening to this episode, you're clearly thinking about it, and I'm so proud of you. And you should be bloody proud of yourself. And that just about wraps up this week's episode. I hope you learned something this episode, and I wish you all the best for future healing. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Squares and Circles Pod and TikTok at Squares and Circles Podcast to keep up to date in between these podcasts. God, how many times can I say podcast? I need to figure that out. Please rate and review this episode as it helps to get the podcast, again, to people who might need to hear it. Thanks so much for listening again, guys. I really appreciate you a lot, and I'm so glad that you are still tuning in. I am so grateful. I will see you next week for another episode. Bye!